that's pretty much it for the intro. So, Kevin.
Thanks, David. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. David Moore and the Idaho Technology Council and our today's sponsor, Perkins Coie, who's one of the largest and most reputable law firms in the Pacific Northwest with 20 offices across the U.S. and an office in China and Taiwan. So thank you. It's a real pleasure. I'm so excited to be a presenter today. I'm a firm believer in the Idaho Technology Council. I'm a techie, obviously, and I'm a firm believer in about being able to not just survive disruption, but work through it and hopefully incorporate it, maybe even be a disruptor. And that's a little bit about my presentation today. So let's go ahead and move forward a little bit. Let's see here. Okay. So today's agenda. Just trying to figure it out here. I got 3 screens going on. I'm still learning, so apologize. So I got to advance here and advance here. But Dave, keep me in check, will you? So today's agenda is we're going to try to keep it at 50,000 feet, but we're going to be going at full speed, literally, across some of the pillars of technology that's bringing disruption into the network and to the industries today. Our first portion of the presentation is going to be reviewing disruption and what that means and our individual role in technology disruption. So how do you rate as your own technology disruptor? Do you create waves? Do you ride them on your surfboard? Or are you crushed by the waves and thrown into the rocks, right? If you're a business owner or a director or you have a leadership role in the organization, well, are you embracing technology disruption? Are you one of the disruptors, or are you trying to figure out and scrambling like a lot of us? And then we're going to pivot and review some of these disruptive technologies that are really changing the landscape and changing things as we know it from an information technology perspective. And just really cool stuff to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about some of those trends, a whole focus of innovation around ethical technology and trust, the financing and the future of IT, because the way we finance IT projects has changed. For Don, he's going to like our subject matter around digital twins. And then there's this thing called human experience platforms, which is kind of scary, but it's coming on really, really fast. And then one of my roles is a network architect. I design networks. But the definition of a technology architect has changed, is changing. It's changing very, very fast. It's very rapidly, and I want to cover that as well. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is take just a second and explain maybe today, maybe not an important question, but a question that maybe needs to be asked is, who am I and why should you care? Well, I'm a network architect. I've been an engineer for 20 years. I've helped hundreds of networks meet technology disruption head on. I currently am also a certified IT instructor. My Cloud Architecture Foundations course is made available free on a learning platform online called Cybrary. I've had 2,100 students enroll in the course from the US, Canada, and as far out as India. Most of my students are in the information technology space. But as many as 25% of my students have been C-levels and CISO and director levels, trying to learn more about architecture. My next course I'm releasing in September is actually how to implement a HIPAA compliance program for those that care about privacy. And I'm hoping to have my first book about technology disruption, the history of the network, what happened to Netscape, what happened to WordPerfect, what happened to Novell, and where are we going from here? And I'm hoping to have my first book published in information technology next year. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, Don, Chris, I'm gonna call you guys out. What I'd like everybody to do today is I'd like you to get out a piece of paper, please, and a writing utensil. So my peers will tell you that I've got a lot of certifications. They like to joke and they like to say I take tests, and I enjoy taking tests. And I don't like taking tests, but I do like to measure where I'm at, and hopefully I'm smart enough to stay in the industry for another day or two. So my ask is that we're going to test you and your knowledge around 5 technologies. So I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 5 technologies, and there's 2 questions for each technology. What is the technology? Can you explain what it is or what it does? And then the second question is, can you explain the problem the technology is trying to solve? So there's 5 technologies, there's 2 questions each. And what we're really trying to do is get our arms around, how are you handling technology disruption? If you know what the technology is, hey, you're going to get a point. If you know enough about it that you can actually say, this is the problem it's trying to solve, well, good for you. And then we'll review our scores at the end. Sound fair? Don's like, I had no idea there was going to be a test, man. I'm out.
I love quizzes.
I'm going to kick it off.
Okay. Question number 1, Kubernetes. What is it? And then the second question, Kubernetes, what is the problem trying to solve? What is the problem Kubernetes is trying to solve? So I'm going to call out Ryan. Ryan, do you know what Kubernetes is? Don't tell anybody. Just nod your head if you say yes or no. You do. Nice. You know what problem it's trying to solve? Okay. So I'm going to give everybody about 60 seconds. Write it down, or maybe write down a couple of buzzwords, around each of those, what it is, a couple of key items, keywords around it. So give you about another 30 seconds. Dave, you're going to get this one right?
I will, but I already saw the slides too.
Oh, well, okay. Open note, open Google. Richard's over there Googling as it speaks. Okay, so let's go ahead. So Kubernetes is around this thing called a container, right? So containers are pretty slick because virtualization's been around for well over 15 years now, but virtualization works at the computer level, the hardware level. And then each of your virtual machines has to have its own instance of an operating system and so forth to emulate the hardware. Virtualization emulates the hardware. Well, containers work at the operating system level. And so it kind of virtualizes the OS as well. So they're very lean, very, very fast containers. And so it's great for developers. So I don't have to build out a bunch of big super compute. I can carve out my operating system with these really lean containers, and I can build out individual dev environments with these containers. And what Kubernetes does, and what it tries to solve, is it tries to manage containers at scale. So if I have 1,000 containers across my DevOps environment and so forth, then it allows me to centralize my management of those containers, kind of like vCenter does in a VMware environment. It's open source, it's free, and really, really nifty stuff. So how did everybody do? Anybody get 2s on that? A lot of 2s?
I'm going to give myself
1s?
1.5.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, good. Let's go to the next one then. Hadoop. So what is it, and what is the problem it's trying to solve? Don, you're smiling. What are you smiling at, man? Did you invent
I've
it?
never even heard the word before.
Ah.
Mm.
So there's a reason to this madness. So, all right, I'm going to give everybody about 30 more seconds. Again, you don't have to write down the whole answer, but a couple of concepts, buzzwords. Trust yourself to say, I knew it, know what the problem is trying to solve. Okay. So Chris, you ready to give us the nod that you got both of these right?
I don't have the good definition, but it's handling something called big data.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is non-relational. How do you tie stuff together in a non-traditional way?
I'm going to give you an extra point. Good job. All right. So, so Hadoop was made by the Apache Corporation, and it's a pretty big deal right now in development. And so there's this concept around big data. So all of these things that are computing and processing and making decisions in our environment, we want data from all of that so that we can learn, so that we can figure out where we're trying to go, what we need to do, how to incorporate that into our solution sets and our stack. And so there's this concept of big data. Data is never changing. It's always growing. It's always being added to. And typically, big data has to be processed through supercomputers. And what Hadoop does through Apache is they've created an architecture where it can share dozens or even hundreds of computers on a network and share the processing power, the distributed storage and software resources across hundreds of computers and combine them so that it's performing the same processing and storage and computational events per second that big supercomputers do, but using the resources that you already have. So example, that's why virtualization is so successful. If you look at your CPU on your laptop right now, you know, you're at 10, 12, 13% CPU utilization. Wouldn't it be great if the technology was there to start combining that and sharing that and turn your environment into this dev supercomputer? Well, that's what Hadoop does. Pretty nifty stuff. Anybody get both of those right? All right. So what is a data lake? Ryan, do you know what a data lake is?
I like lakes.
Like Snowflake, yeah?
Correct. You get 2 points. It's just like a snowflake. So what is it and what is the problem trying to solve? Give you a few more seconds. Okay. So a data lake. So when you're building out big data in networks and you're in the enterprise, there's just what they tried to do is they first of all started to build out this thing called a data warehouse, which is a great big repository, a great big database. Chris was onto it and so forth. A data warehouse is a great big structured file system to support great big data, right? Well, what a data lake is it removes all of that structure. And so it's basically just a flat data repository. And so without that structure, it means it can access all of this great big data a lot faster, a lot more efficient. And so it's tracking portions of the data and it uses that tracking and that metadata to find it rather than a file system with file structure with folders and everything else. And so really, really cool. You're seeing this in the enterprise and it's this thing called the data lake. What is blockchain and what problem is blockchain trying to solve? And we only have one more after this. I know you guys are like, I didn't want to take an MCAT or an LSAT, but there's a point to this madness. What is blockchain and what is it trying to solve? So Don, do you know this one?
I do know this one, I think.
Yeah.
I finally heard of one.
How about you, Ryan? You got lots of Bitcoin?
Yeah, you know, Kevin, I foolishly sold my Bitcoin, you know, way too early, but I did for a while.
Right.
But to answer your question, it's an algorithm for you know, for transactions without a centralized bank, essentially.
Kinda. So basically what blockchain is taking data, breaking it into blocks. When you need more data, you need to add data to it, you add another block, and then there's connectors. So in sequence, block A to B to C to D to E. And then what happens is the blocks, and this is why Bitcoin uses blockchain. Bitcoin is not blockchain. And blockchain is not Bitcoin, but Bitcoin uses blockchain for its security and for its trust. So what it does is blockchain takes these blocks and then disperses them instead of one central computer managing the encryption and the security, you know, for the to carving up that about data and putting the encryption on it. Takes the blocks, spreads it out across thousands of computers. Each of those computers has its own unique encryption for that specific block. And so now I've got my encryption and my data shared across 1,000 PCs and so forth. And then it uses this ledger, this distributed ledger, to kind of combine it all together. The key thing about blockchain is it's free and it's open source. And the guy that invented it, and I don't have his name handy, but the guy that invented it, very, very innovative. And all of your financial institutions right now are trying to figure out how to take blockchain and commoditize it, because what it's doing in the industry is it's driving down to a zero cost transaction. When I want to do an electronic transaction to transfer funds from one account to another, the bank wants to charge me a fee for that. Even if it's electronic, they want to charge me 50 cents or whatever. What blockchain's doing is it's driving innovation in the financial industry down to a $0 transaction level from an electronic perspective. So really big innovation coming from blockchain. So nice job, guys. Last question. What is autonomous edge and what is the problem it's trying to solve? How many of you have heard of it?
I'll admit that's a new one for me.
Okay, so autonomous edge is a construct around Internet of Things. Okay, and so it's comparable to edge computing. So basically, Internet of Things, it's saying that an autonomous edge is making decisions at the edge of our network rather than having to come back to a computer to make those decisions. So the best way to explain autonomous edge in Internet of Things and how it's using is to look at a train station. So what train station has video cameras that are on the IP network, and what it's going to do is it's going to look at the passengers and the traffic of passengers, which ways are going downtown, which ways are going south, so forth, how many passengers and so forth, their activity. And based on that, those cameras themselves are making decisions and then doing things like redirecting passengers to a secondary train or a secondary path, or those cameras can tell that an incident is occurring, alert the police, or do some kind of congestion control or announcement overhead or whatever. That's what autonomous edge is it's saying, I want to move my Internet of Things intelligence to the edge of my network at my edge devices rather than having to bring it back to my data center to make the decisions, right? So the reason why I wanted to go through this exercise, and so how did we do, is really to kind of take a second and talk about, disruption. And I think disruption is really about three things: what I do and what I'm doing about disruption myself, what my employer or the business is doing at disruption, and the industry as a whole. So I'm basically going to make some assumptions here that if you're 60% score or less, then I'm going to say the technology wave hits you and it hits you hard. You're punked. Your surfboard threw you into the coral reef, and you've got some work to do. My argument is that, nobody wants a 60% efficient employee. Nobody wants a 60% attorney. And so I'm going to be putting in my argument, my presentation to you today, that we have to become more technical as individuals, and we have to become more technical as an employees. And it's never been more critical now, and there's never been a more important time to be a member of a great organization like the Idaho Technology Council. I believe in everything they're doing, trying to show the marketplace that, hey, we've got an intelligent workforce. We're a great place to build your manufacturing facility here in Idaho. And it's a really important time to have that discussion, because my argument is that every aspect of business today is not a result of technology, but it relies on technology, right? And so every business relies, every part of my business relies on technology today. So to be candid, I'm tired of having discussions with people that start right out the gate by saying, okay, hang on a second, just before we go too far, I'm not a techie. But my point is that the new workforce is looking and demanding for technical skills and soft skills around technology. That we need to be able to do things like be able to technically write about technology. We need to be able to use the tools and talk about it. And this is why Idaho Technology Council, they get it, they understand it. And the important concept is that from workforce to employers, we've got to brave this technology adoption. We've got to learn it, we've got to adopt it, and we've got to use it. If your score is 70% or better, well, good for you. You're Albert Einstein. You're using more than the dark matter between your ears. So nice job. But now what I want to do is go down a little bit about the personal technology disruption path.
So, quick question.
Yeah.
So these are all, things on the back end of technology, but as a below 60 scorer, I use a lot of these technologies, but I just don't know what they're called.
Sure. Well, so this is where I think this next slide, really good question, and a really good statement, Don, is here's my point. There's a difference between, tech aware and tech savvy. I don't think we have to be tech savvy, but I do think that the world we live in today has zero room for us to be anything other than tech aware, right? So
Oh, yeah.
my argument is that technology is in every facet of our day-to-day life. And I'm disappointed with people that introduce themselves again as not being a techie, because I think we all at some point have to be. So what I tell my students is that what we need to aspire to is a general knowledge of technology and what it's trying to do to solve business problems. If we have our arms around, like our first 5 questions here, if we have our arms around, hey, what that technology is, we're in a good place. If we've got even that extra step of what the problem is going to solve with that technology, then I am a better employee because I can help my employer innovate. I know that I'm staying abreast of the technology, so I'm going to be valuable as an employee, and I'm doing the right things that I need to from a personal development standpoint, right? And so, Merriam-Webster talks about, the process of learning and gaining knowledge or skill by studying, practicing, being taught, or experiencing something, and so it's the experience as well. We use technology every day. I think it's our personal responsibility, if we want to be successful in today's world, to go one step further and try to understand it a little bit, right? So that brings us to personal development and technical development and learning and applying what you learn. And then to the point where we're going to gain experience. And then it's that experience that gets us to that savvy level, right? We're already adopting technology in our day-to-day lives. And so what are we doing to develop our skills and our knowledge base around that? So I think disruption is not just about what's coming down the pipe, but I think disruption is also about personal growth. And it's our challenge, especially now more than ever, because there's innovation and technology is not being developed any faster than it ever has been in a modern era than it is now. And what's happening as well as the COVID-19 challenge is changing the way we're learning. It's changing the where and how we're doing business. And technology is driving it. And we're being remote because of technology. And so now more than ever, I think we've got to get our arms around it. Does that sound like a fair argument?
Oh, yeah. I think you got to be a lifelong learner to survive.
Bingo.
I also
Bingo.
like that you said aware too, because with technology now, it's so easy, as long as you're aware of something, to go back and look at those developer documents or other documentation and become more savvy.
Right. So here's the challenge that I want to put from, I'm not trying to be a self-help guy, right? That's not the point of this. The point is, though, is that I think all of us, if we want to be successful, whatever that level of successful is, we've got to have some root, some foundation in technology, right? Disruption is either going to roll us over or we're going to ride the wave. Hopefully, for a few of us, we're actually ahead of it and we're driving some of that disruption. I want to be a leader in my business. I want to be a leader in my industry. I want to be a leader in the space that I represent. And so because of that, I think technology is one of those things that I have to have my arms around if I'm going to achieve some of that. You know, learning fuels creativity. It sharpens with our new skills. And I also think one of the things that learning helps us do, and this is an important thing that I also tell my students, is it helps us, the wider we are, the more we know, the easier it is for us to identify those things that we love to do. And if we love to do it, we're going to be masters of it. My dad, who I recently lost, was a police officer. He was a deputy police chief. He had 3 master's degrees. He was the most educated police officer I'll ever know. He had 3 master's degrees. But why was he a police officer? Because he loved to serve. He loved to help people. He just enjoyed doing the work. But it took him a lot of learning and a lot of things to do before he figured out what he really wanted to do. And so I think that's also important. Technology, I think, can help us understand what we really want to do. So I'd like to pivot now, and I want to talk to those leaders and business owners out there as well. And it's important for the employees that are going to work for them to also kind of pay attention to what disruption means to the employer right now. So, you know, what does technology disruption mean to a business owner right now, other than, you know, scare the crap out of you? You know, what we're hoping technology disruption means is that it's going to mean growth for the business, right? Growth in revenues, growth in customer success, growth in business outcomes. And, you know, as H.G. Wells said, adapt or perish. We have to adapt and change because of technology disruption, or we're going to be, you know, under that 60% that's going to ride us over. We're going to kick the bucket. We're going to be pushing up daisies. We're going to be sleeping with the fishes, taking a dirt nap, basically, you know what I'm saying, immortally challenged, right? We're going to have some work to do. So technology disruptions is a huge deal for the business owner and for the employer. Every organization I work with right now tries to answer 2 questions. What's coming down the pipe, Kevin, and what are we going to do about it? So for business owners and business leadership, we can't all be like Bill Gates, where his answer is, well, I'm just going to hire smarter people than me, right? We can't just rely on smart people and other smarter people to do the work for us. So we've got to, as business owner and business leaders, get a handle and an understanding of what's coming down the pipe and how we need to react and move through it. And so that's what we're talking about to the employers out there, is that we really need to lead technology disruption. And that hopefully our goals and our business outcomes and objectives, you know, are going to be towards embracing disruption and getting ahead of it and taking a leap and a step above our market competition. So how do we compete as employers? So, you know, especially with technical disruption, let's break this down to a few core elements. So, you know, our workforce right now, well, it needs to be more advanced. You know, technical aptitude is no longer a bonus. It is a requirement, is a foundation, new bar. It is at the level of that employee that needs to be there today. That's what we talk about, the future workforce. What does that look like? Well, I've got to have technical aptitude. I don't have to be savvy, but I have to have aptitude. You know, the things that's happening in the industry right now are traditional IT tasks, and, you know, the capabilities of our normal IT teams, those are disappearing, because what's happening is, to embrace the disruption and lead the disruptions, you know, organizations are looking for new technical skills and new soft skill sets based on how we grew the network up yesterday. That's changed tomorrow. We're looking, according to the industry, that soft skills in 2020 are things like communication, teamwork, problem solving, leadership, and responsibility. So those are the soft skills. But the tech savviness, you know, where that's going is probably the number one shift I'm hearing from my customers right now, folks, is the director of IT last year is now this year the director of DevOps. So I'm no longer managing the network. I'm managing the operations of the development environment. And what that means is I'm going to tell you a story. I got a couple of new little baby Jack Russell Terriers. They're sisters. Love them to death. And I took them to the vet for the first time. That's when I realized that vets are doing pretty well. They've understanding this technology. They can make $1 or $2. And so I just took my dog in to get the shots, and it's just this little small mom and pop vet office. And I get from them on the app. They said, "Hey, download our app." So I downloaded the app, and they're saying, "Thank you for coming, and here's your next visit, and here's where you go get your prescription for your dogs." And my little vet that has husband and wife vet and like maybe 4 employees, they have their own app. And so that's the story I want to share, is that's why DevOps is really changing the way we do business in the network. It's because it's business outcomes and customer experiences that have to be delivered by the technology, not because of it. And so technology, we're buying it, we're incorporating it, we're using it, we're deploying it to deliver those outcomes, not just as a byproduct of it. And so what the other piece that I want to share as well is it's really coming down to experience. And my students hate it when I tell them this, but experience is always going to trump knowledge. And so diplomas, degrees, certifications, they're important, but this is where experience comes in. I'm going to give you an example myself as an experience I'll share with you real quick. I went to San Jose to take the CCIE, Certified Cisco Internet Expert Lab with Cisco at San Jose 3 times, and I failed 3 times. It's the 8-hour lab. It's the worst, most difficult lab you can ever go through. And I'm a book guy. I read books. That's how I learned. I never installed the technology in a network, but I learned about it and learned how to be an engineer because it was in books. And so I went to the lab 3 times, and all 3 times I failed the troubleshooting portion of it. And the troubleshooting portion is, hey, you have 8 trouble tickets. You have 2 hours to solve these 8 trouble tickets out of 10. And you get 21 points. And if you don't get an 80 or above on the exam, you fail. And if you miss, you don't close out your 8 tickets, well, you lose 21 points. And so you've lost everything to pass. And the point being is I didn't have the experience to look at the lines of code and say, these are the 2 lines that are wrong, and fix it and close my tickets in time. But what I could do is I could completely remove the configuration on my router and start from line 1 down to line 50, and then it would work because that's how the book showed me to do it. And it's that experience, that savviness is where we as students and as employers and as leaders need to get to, is we need to experience the technology, we need to use it, we need to incorporate it into our network with pilot programs and POVs, proof of values and concepts and so forth, because it's by using it and experiencing it is how we're going to really understand whether or not we need to incorporate it and use it, or if it's just noise for some other company, if that makes sense. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to pivot to this new disruption that's called ethical technology and trust. So let's take a second, Dave, and see if anybody's got any questions out.
Yep, I was just about to say we got a couple of questions here. Donald Donald has a question about how can you screen for curiosity? You talked about hiring people in the talent needed and how you need to maintain that. How do you screen for that, academic versus practical skills? You kind of touched on that just now. And we also have a question from Capri about attitude and aptitude.
Ooh, I like that one, the way that one sounds. Well, let's take Don's questions first because he's been an active participant, and we'll get a prize out to you, Don. So Ryan, make sure you figure out how to do that. You like the way I pivot and make the sales guy pay for the giveaway?
I like
there, Don?
that.
I got your back here, Kevin.
I've done this a couple times.
I'll take care of it.
Yeah. So Don, your question is when I'm interviewing or screening employees and so forth, experience versus knowledge. Is that the question, or do you want to maybe restate it?
Well, it's, the technical versus practical. And like you mentioned, a lot of people can read books or get all the buzzwords or whatever, but how do you know if they're staying curious so that not only have they learned something, but they want to continue to learn? They're always asking questions. Why,
Right.
why?
So that's a really interesting question and a little bit of a challenging question. You know, I would say that way I interview employees and the way I interview people, maybe I can use my own experience, right? Is so I look at the resume and, you know, great, we've got education and so forth. And then I'm going to sit it down and I'm going to say, okay, so tell me a problem that you've solved in the last 90 days. And then, so they're going to tell me the problem of solving. And I'm going to say, now, what did you do to solve the problem? And I'm going to start breaking that down. And so I say, okay, did you? And then they're going to tell me, well, what did they Google? Did they read? Did they call the community? Did they use Microsoft Teams? You know, where did they go to get their resources, or were they savvy or whatever? And so their troubleshooting skills is what I'm going to be looking for. And it's how they solve a problem is where I see the experience versus that book knowledge comes in, right? And it's okay to say I Googled it and everything else, but it's the fact it helps me narrow down on, you know, no, I am not going to hire anybody that has every skill that I want them to have. What I really am trying to do is I'm trying to narrow it down to a problem solver, to someone who can be a team member, and that's a person that I'm going to invest $50,000 in training to get them to where I need them to be.
Yeah, I think,
does that answer your question? It may not answer it fully.
no, I think it does, and it goes along kind of the lines of when I was interviewing people. I want to know, you know, not only that you have some knowledge and you understand what it is that we're hiring you for, what you're going to do, but the ability to problem solve is you know, the application of everything you've learned, because many of the problems we're going to face, in fact, most of them, are not in a textbook anywhere because we haven't had that problem yet.
Right. Well, and I think another part of that interview is going to be on this next section that we're going to be talking about, ethical technology and trust. So I think it's a really good question, Don. So Dave, what was the other question? Other person?
Yeah, so we have another question. Fran, would you like to ask the question on the directly, or just have me read it? She asked about attitude and aptitude. Fran, if you'd like to maybe share a little bit more about that.
Yep, took me a minute to get the mute buttons all turned off. Similar to the last question, how do you screen for that? I really am not always so concerned about their level of education. As a matter of fact, it's quite a mix. But
Right.
To have somebody with that attitude and that aptitude, I find that those guys will excel if I can find them, and if I can keep them happy.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what I call attitude is soft skills, right? And so if you Google soft skills, you're going to see one of the top 6 or top 7. You're going to see soft skills that are important in 2020, right? And so some of those soft skills are does the individual you know, have teamwork skills? Does the individual have communication skills? Does the individual have problem solving skills? And so what I would do when I'm looking for an employee right now is I would base my questions on I would go down a path with Don and say, let's look at the aptitude side by giving them, you know, what problem did you solve in the last 90 days? And then I would pivot from that and I would ask a question or create a scenario in a different way to try to vet those soft skills, right? How they would respond to those soft skills, and I would continue to ask questions to try to get from them, you know, where I would rate them on a 1 to 10 against those soft skills. And that is really the balance that this new future workforce that the industry is talking about. And it's really, it's a great question, Fran. And it's really bringing into this other piece, this thing called ethics, ethical technology, because that's where the next disruption is happening. And it really is about those soft skills and being able to vet the person on more than just technical aptitude that's driving the business. So does that answer your question at all?
Yep, that was good.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to do
If I
now,
could offer
folks, go ahead.
one quick shameless plug here on that soft skill portion. Keep an eye out for military veterans. Veterans that have been in for active duty for a good while. We inherently tend to have communication, problem solving, teamwork. I mean, these skills are beaten into us from the very beginning. So I just want to throw a plug out there for my veterans that are out there looking for employment. They tend to have those soft skills in spades.
Yep, and I have a couple of them that are rock stars.
There it is.
Absolutely.
Also, adapt and overcome skills.
Excellent. Great. Well, thanks, Ryan, for your input there. So appreciate it. So what I want to talk about now is this disruption that's all around us that nobody's talking about. So Don, you mentioned you wanted to come in and hear what's happening and changing. This is happening right now. This is big. Okay. So this is a huge trend. This is a huge disruption in the business, and this is driving all the enterprise and how they're making decisions today. So this is a big deal. And the reason why it's a big deal is because of this thing called COVID-19 and going from 0 to 100 in the remote workforce, right? So Spokane County is a very, I'm proud to be in their network. They're a great customer of ours. They went from 0 to 1,200 remote employees overnight. That's a big deal. But nothing's changed other than that. They still need to bring in their tax dollars. They still need their revenues from paying tickets and all of those things. But now all of those employees are working from home, right? And so, now we're in this environment. So you've got your cloud. Everybody's moved to the cloud. So there's cloud first or cloud always or whatever that particular network architecture based, philosophy is from the company. So, there's no more borders. There's no more things like perimeter firewalls anymore because we're outside of that because our employees are working from home or they're at Starbucks, assuming Starbucks is open and their lobby's open. There's no more borders, right? And so this remote workforce combined with things like cloud, well, that's why things like breaches and so forth are all over the news. And so to just give you a couple of statistics, I'm kind of a security guy, so I'm kind of dialed in on this. Last year, there were 500 different breaches in the United States alone, 500 that exposed more than 1 million records. That is scary, right? And just in general, on the commercial side of the industry, the US is averaging 20 data breaches a day. So now we have this huge marketplace out there, right? The largest economy in the world. We have all of us remote workforce. We're changing the way we're doing this. We've got an architecture with cloud and everything where there's no more borders. And so what's happened is that we have been messaging to the industry for the last 3-4 years, this concept of zero trust, right? So we came from an environment where it's trust but verify. And now we're going to a zero trust, but guess what? They're getting in. It's all over the news. 500 instances of 1 million records or more just last year, right? So the disruption is that now what's driving the network and what's driving the business is that our technology must be trustworthy, but also align with the ethics and values of our corporation. And this disruption is called ethical technology and trust. So, what do we mean by ethical technology and trust? Well, the core of ethical technology and trust is that organizations are realizing that every part of their business is affected by that's affected by technology disruption is an opportunity to gain or to lose trust. And in the security business, we call that risk. So we now have an environment that's no longer about compliance anymore, but trust is our business critical goal. Whatever we do, trust has become a 360-degree spin in every direction of our business, not just the technology, but our business. Our processes, our procedures, our methodology, our documentation, all of this at a high level needs to verify and deliver trust. Trust is expected by our stakeholders, the people that have all the money, that keep us in business, that pay our paychecks. Well, they don't want to be in the papers. And so the business leaders are reevaluating how all the ways down to their products and the services they offer and the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis. Is the network, is the technology that they're incorporating, does it align with their efforts to deliver the trust in their logo, trust in their brand, trust across their business partners and business associates, trust with their employees and their families, all of it. So the change in the direction is from our C-levels down, that we really are emphasizing this ethical technology, and things like DevOps are creating a set of tools to uncover the weaknesses and flaws in our technology that might be exposing us and our logo to risk. When we make every business decision, what we're really trying to do is benefit the network and hopefully to the chagrin of our competition. But the other piece of this ethical technology adoption is that we also are trying to incorporate down to even the code level of our software, the values and standards and the ethics of our corporation at an organizational level, the core value level, even down to our software, where our technology is committed to improving the well-being of our customers, our brand, and while also we benefit from it. So that's the concept of this disruption, and where we're going is it's not just to deliver security, but also to deliver and align with the core values and ethics of our corporation. So, we're talking about when someone's attempting to access the network, we're not talking about the level of getting a message from your computer that says, unfortunately, at this time, we must gracefully limit your request based on our MENO security policy, but, please try again later. We're not talking about that level of politeness, but the general idea of this is aligning our business policies and values, even down to the code level, and helping deliver trust. So, what are we talking about? We're encoding our company's values. We're talking about a foundation built on trust, building up our stakeholders, hardening our defenses, being transparent with everybody down to the levels of our employees and what we're doing. Maybe looking at our cultural norms, and deploying the power of all, from the community to everybody involved around trust. So any questions on that before we go to the next topic? Okay, so this one's got a few slides here, just a couple, 3 slides. This is a big deal. I'm not a finance guy. I'm not the guy that, plays in spreadsheets all day. But I do think this is important, is that, one of the trends and disruptions that's happening in the industry right now is the way that IT is financing its projects. Technology strategy is becoming part of the business strategy. That's the important takeaway. That it used to be about business, we need to sell more. Or business manufacturing, like Don, we need to make more widgets, right? Well, now what's happening is now the technology strategy is just very much a part of the business strategy. And the technology, what we're buying now is about, it's outcome driven. So what used to be, well, it's old, it's obsolete, we need to replace it because it's faster and better, and it will be supported by the manufacturer. Now we're evaluating technology and building budgets around that technology specifically that is outcome based. And if it doesn't deliver business outcomes, we're not incorporating that technology, and that funding is not going to be approved. And so you're seeing different kinds of flexible funding pop up to get some of these things funded, because we're reinterpreting things like return on investment and so forth. And so our funding is now going through a process of what we call agile. You'll see Agile and Scrum and project management and product development. Now funding is also going through an iteration of Agile. So we're talking about a product-based rather than outcome-based, not service-based, and that these outcomes are a roadmap. We're going to deliver this, and building out new kinds of investment capital that will help us. You're seeing flexible funding like leasebacks and chargebacks and other types of ways of funding this. You're seeing soft dollars and ROI reinterpreted. So, we're no longer talking about an operational budget. We've got 300 grand to refresh our wireless access points. They're old, they need replaced. The new budgeting is very much laser targeted to meet the business outcomes. I need this many dollars to deliver this much business result. And this is the technology battle that every IT manager and leader is facing right now. It's how do I incorporate these disruptive technologies, but then pivot from that to deliver the business outcomes. And if it's not going to deliver that outcome, then the technology is not going to be funded, and we need to move on. And things like refreshing our wireless aren't going to happen. And so these agile funding methods, around infrastructure and development and DevOps and so forth is really trying to laser focus on helping organizations get to their next killer app or their next killer service so that they can leapfrog their competition based on all this disruption and all this innovation. And it's changing the way that we finance these projects as well. Make sense?
Yeah, you can't wait 12 or 16 months to get an outcome.
Yeah.
With Agile, it's every 2 weeks. Are you delivering something?
Exactly. So again, the fundamental way we're financing IT's changed. Products and outcome based. We're deliberate now. We're not just looking for modernization and improvements, but we're looking for year-to-year measurable outcomes and metrics and so forth. And so we're talking about CFOs and CIOs and so forth. They're going to be looking at different criteria before they accept the funding, shifting from a CapEx to an operational expense, coming up with new forms of ROI, and making sure that we're calculating the metrics at the end. So Don, this is your piece. Dave, how are we doing on time? I got probably about another 20 minutes or so. Is that going to be okay?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I know it's a little longer than some people may have expected, and it's great content. So we're going to keep going.
Okay, good. Thank you. So just got a few more slides left, but this one is really interesting. So how many of you have heard of digital twins? Anybody want to give me another test answer and tell me what a digital twin is? Okay, good. So
Bridge
the reason
between
why
physical and digital.
Okay. So that's actually the correct answer. So you looked at my notes. I know you did, cheater. So anyway, so our next technology disruption is not Star Wars stuff. This is today. It's what's called digital twinning. And digital twinning is really causing an incredibly faster than we've ever seen, innovation in things like Don's manufacturing. So Don, what did you manufacture? What did you make? You're muted, sir.
Semiconductors, I believe it was.
Semiconductors. Okay. Well, this is going to line up with you really well. So you're seeing this in aircraft and oil and mining and healthcare and medical research and smart grid technologies and so forth, because digital twinning allows us to create and change our manufacturing and change our designs at the speed of Agile, right? And so that's, talk a little bit about that more next. So digital twins is the process of using computer-generated simulations and digital versions of your product to test and analyze every aspect of the design and in the manufacturing process. So, manufacturing is using digital twins to design their products better, to test them, and they're actually building out things called as built. So you've got, at the end state, you're building out a simulated end state, and you're actually putting it on the simulated operations floor. And you're giving it, make 5 million widgets and let's see what starts to break. And you're able to simulate it down into the parts level, right? And so airliners are, using this to test their systems for takeoffs and landings, and manufacturers and their machines on the plant of the floor. Operational states, what it looks like when it's in operation, so it simulates the wear and tear of the parts. If we can eliminate the service intervals or reduce the service intervals and the downtime and reduce our operational costs, hey, we're all making more money. And this is changing the way businesses are predicting and performing their maintenance windows, and all because they're changing the way they're manufacturing. And I got a really good example in the next slide. So let's look at how digital twins is helping an aircraft manufacturer, right? So Don makes semiconductors. So the great big, Pratt Whitney engines and so forth, it's on a Boeing 777 and so forth. The engine alone has tens of thousands of parts. And every one of those parts has a sensor. And so if you got 10,000 parts, you got another 10, maybe there were 2 sensors, you got 20,000 sensors, and each of these sensors is bringing in data because your computer on board needs to measure every single part of that engine, because you got 300 lives on board, right? So you've got all of this metadata and so forth. So there's a lot that can go wrong in that. Well, what if through digital simulation, I can take 10,000 parts and 20,000 sensors, and I can do the same thing with 8,000 parts and 15,000 sensors, right? That's what's driving digital twinning. And so anybody want to guess what it cost without Googling, Don, don't cheat. Anyone want to tell me what it costs Boeing to make a 777 MAX? What it costs per plane?
$700 million.
Okay. Well, not quite that. It's $400 million. Okay. That's to make one plane. And we won't even talk about the billions in R&D to get there, right? But if we can take digital twinning and just the 10,000 parts in an engine and make it simpler, reduce the number of parts we have to manufacture, drive down cost, increase innovation, that's where digital twinning is happening. And this is a real deal. Make sense?
Yeah, because prototyping and doing physical models is expensive and super time consuming.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so last 3 slides here. So I really appreciate everybody's participation today. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about, just for a couple of slides here, the human experience platform. So this is a little bit scary, even for a tech guy like me. It seems and appears like really Terminator cyborg kind of stuff. But what's driving this is the Internet of Things, right? So I'll give you an example, story, right? Highways are filled with cameras and microphones and sensors, and your new Tesla M3 electric car that we're so proud about. Well, it's monitoring our facial expressions. It's monitoring our voice. It's monitoring how we're driving and using the car. And it's analyzing these inputs in real time. And it's using computer to evaluate our eyes and scanning our eyes and voice recognition and using deep, artificial intelligence and learning to make the determination, what, we're getting a little tired. We're getting distracted. And so in response to that, well, what happens is these tools start kicking in, our AI starts kicking in, the thermostat turns the temperature up, turns the volume up, and then this soft conversation comes over the sound system and gently suggests that maybe we should pull over or grab some coffee because we might be getting a little tired. That is where the technology is trying to go, and that is the human experience platform. So the enterprise and manufacturers are focusing right now on the human experience platform. Over the next 18 to 24 months, we should be seeing some really new innovation and a lot of new technology coming out of this to some outcomes that we actually can start using. Really nifty stuff. So how does this work? Well, it's really about this thing called HCD, or human-centered design. And what we're really trying to do with the technology here is that it's human-centered and emotionally driven. So to understand how a human reacts, their emotion, their behaviors, this is called human-centered design. And it's really trying to bring the human into focus with the technology and using deep human interaction. And then also, here comes those ethics and values again, and even things like the belief system, bringing that into something that the computer sensors can monitor and measure and try to create not only an experience and a response, but an emotional response as well to the human condition. And it does this through sentiment analysis. So it wants to somehow survey your opinions and your attitude toward the situation or an event, tracking your eye movements, which is going to interpret how you're thinking, what your focus is, what your reactions are, your emotional state, your facial coding by your facial expressions, trying to figure out what your emotional reaction to an event is, even things like skin temperature and measuring the electrical conductance of your skin to understand what your emotion response is to an event. Huge focus of technology over the next couple of years. Last couple slides. And I won't take a lot of time on this because I know we're running over just a little bit, but I'm a network architect. And so I wanted to kind of bring this in just a little bit. There's a huge push in the enterprise to redefine the role and responsibilities of how we architect and how we design the network. And that's a big deal. So we're redefining the role of the architect for a couple of reasons. And that is 54% of the CIOs interviewed by Forbes last year says their network is not currently able to support this future technology disruption. And so these CIOs are realizing that their architecture is not ready. It needs to be more strategically important than ever to be ready and to remain competitive and so forth and survive this technical disruption. Well, they've got to change the way they approach network architecture. And so the concept and definition of a network architect is changing. So we're basically throwing them out of their towers and we're putting them in the trenches. And basically what we're saying is the network architect, his main role is to help understand and build out the architecture to support the software development requirements of DevOps and the complex designs necessary to support some of this disruptive technology that's coming down the road, while also making sure that we do so in a way that we are agile and responsive and quick and efficient, because our competition is beating us. Our competition is more agile than us. They have the market advantage right now. And so the architect needs to be rebranded, refocused, but yet be agile as well. So a couple more things here. I'll skip this one. So what it's changing into scope, it used to be technology only. Now it's business and technology is what the architect needs to focus on, rather than standardizing and making sure everything is something that's manageable. We're standing at a network switch. We're going to use the same network switch across our enterprise. We're going to use this router. We're going to use the same router across all our locations. So it's going to make it easier for us to manage. Instead of standardization, we need to make sure that the network we're going to deploy actually has the ability to transform our business. We're talking about talking to every other facet in the organization to make sure that we're collaborative and engaged to deliver business outcomes. We're talking about agility and problem solving rather than just building out a model to be 5 7s or 4 9s or whatever our design goal is. We need to be agile and problem solving to get to those outcomes. And we're putting guidance around governance. So what do we mean by governance? It's back to that ethics and values and that ethical technology. We're not just going to adhere to HIPAA, but we're also going to adhere to our own ethics and values and standards to gain trust. And that we're going to maximize the business impact of our technology. Otherwise, we're out. So 9 shifts real quick. It's about agility and speed, innovation. It's about open partnerships. Our ecosystem's bigger, our partners are better, our business associate agreements are wider, our boundaries have blurred. It's about a future workforce. It's about a change in governance and funding. It's about a change in leadership and our culture. It's about incorporating digital transition everywhere. It's about reorganizing our data units within our business and continuing to adopt cloud where we can. So I'd like to leave it open for questions. That was my presentation for today.
That's excellent. There was a question about the 94%. I think they were referring to your comment that said 54% of CIOs interviewed felt that their current technology stacks were capable of supporting current and future needs, though.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe I misspoke. 54% of the CIOs said their stacks were not capable of supporting the technology disruption that's coming down the pipe. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. So more than half of the CIOs say our network's not ready. We've got to go figure it out. We better do it fast.
Don had a question about a COVID screener.
Yeah, you were talking about, the human, what was the acronym? You had a GLA for that, HCD, Human Centered Design. Seems like a problem that's right in front of us right now. It's too hard to test everybody. It takes too long to get the results. What if we had you could walk through this screener, or a camera could pan you and they would know if you had enough of the symptoms to say, oh, you probably need to be quarantined.
I think that stuff's there. I think that's a great point. I know that they're working on things like at airports and so forth, to be able to sense things like temperature and so forth, and some of those things, without just in the environment, being able to call out an individual and say, you know what, we need to take you aside and do some more questions with you or whatever, because, we don't like the way that your environment, you're putting out too much heat. I mean, those things I think are there. I would hope that we're using some of this technology. I know twinning is being used in healthcare for some of this stuff, and I'm sure it's being used for things like vaccine development and so forth, because, they're down at the DNA level of this thing, right? And so, let's hope we get there soon.
And I think in a culture more like, China, where they have less freedoms, they can implement technology like that a lot quicker.
Sure.
We have that other constraint.
Well, where Ryan is there in his part of town, I think he has. Well, do you wear a mask on the golf course, or do you say, "Hey, I'm social distance"?
In the
already?
clubhouse. In the clubhouse.
Golf
Golf is inherently socially distant.
I see.
So yeah.
You ever think maybe people just don't like you?
It's a distinct possibility. My daily phone call activities led me to believe that's true.
Any other questions, folks? Well, I just really want to say thank you to David, and thank you to the ITC for having me today. It's been a privilege. I would hope, David, that if there's a way that we might be able to get some surveys out to the attendees or something like that, I would just really like, or even an email to Dave. I just really like some input that, if there was value in the discussion today, or something that we needed to change. It's how I learn. I get better. I need input. So if you have a minute, throw a mail to Dave or whatever survey, Dave, if you have one. But would love to hear from you. And if you want to contact me in any way, you want to talk about tech some more, always around.
That is a great
real
point.
eye opener. Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Yep. Any feedback?
Don, Chris, Fran, everybody, thank you so much. David, especially, thank you. You guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon, and be safe out there.
Thank you, everybody.